Part 1. The Breaking Point Captain. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, staring at the list of names on his display. 37 humans had died in the last mission. 37 people who would never see Earth again. They had fought on a world so cold that exposed skin froze in seconds, against an enemy that the Galactic Council could have handled themselves if they weren't too afraid to fight. Jake was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep could fix, but the deep exhaustion that came from watching friends die for people who didn't care about them. For 15 years he had served the Council faithfully. He had followed their orders, fought their wars, and lost count of how many times he had nearly died on alien worlds that humans had no reason to be. And that the Council called humans Deathworlders because Earth was considered one of the most dangerous planets in known space. High gravity, violent weather, aggressive predators, and deadly diseases made Earth a nightmare by galactic standards. But those same conditions had made humans incredibly tough. They could survive environments that would kill most alien species within hours. The Council had discovered Earth 50 years ago. At first they had been friendly, offering humanity a place in galactic civilization. But it hadn't taken long for humans to realize the truth. The Council didn't want partners. They wanted soldiers. Species from safe, peaceful worlds didn't know how to fight. They needed someone who could do the dirty work, and humans were perfect for the job. Jake looked around his bridge. His crew was exhausted. Lieutenant Ben Cooper sat at the navigation station, his eyes red from lack of sleep. Ensign Amy Price was bandaging a wound on her arm that medical had missed. Sergeant Chris Ward stood by the door, his rifle still in his hands because he hadn't relaxed enough to put it down yet. These people trusted Jake. They followed his orders without question. And for what? So the Council could sit in their comfortable chambers and congratulate themselves on maintaining peace while humans did the bleeding? The communication panel beeped. Jake felt his jaw tighten. He knew what was coming before he even opened the message. Ambassador Lisa Grant appeared on the screen. She looked as tired as Jake felt. Lisa had been humanity's voice on the Council homeworld for 10 years. She had argued, pleaded, and negotiated for basic rights that every other species took for granted. The Council had promised improvements 100 times, but nothing ever changed. "Jake, I'm sorry," Lisa said quietly. "They're issuing new orders." Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Let me guess. Another mission we can't refuse," Lisa nodded. "There's a rebellion on the mining colonies in the rim worlds. The Council wants human forces to suppress it. They're saying it's a matter of galactic security." "It's always a matter of galactic security," Jake said bitterly. "What's the real reason?" "The miners are refusing to work under current conditions. They're demanding better pay, safer environments, and actual legal rights. The Council's corporate partners are losing money." Lisa's expression hardened. "Jake, I've seen the reports from those colonies. The conditions are worse than anything we allow on Earth. The miners aren't rebels. They're slaves fighting for basic dignity." Jake felt the anger he had been holding back for years start to rise. "And the Council wants us to force them back to work. Yes, they've already sent 3 alien security forces, but the miners fought them off. So now they're calling in the humans." Lisa leaned closer to the screen. "Jake, I'm done. I've spent 10 years trying to work within their system, and it's gotten us nowhere." Today, the Council passed a new resolution. They're reclassifying humans as auxiliary forces. We'll have even fewer rights than before. We're officially second-class citizens now. The bridge had gone silent. Everyone was listening. Jake made a decision that he knew would change everything. "Lisa, send me the coordinates of those mining colonies. But not for the reason the Council thinks." Lisa's eyes widened slightly, then she smiled. It was the first real smile Jake had seen from her in months. "Understood, Captain. The data's being transmitted now." Jake turned to his crew. "Change course. We're going to the rim worlds." Ben looked up from his station. "Sir, what are we going to do when we get there?" "We're going to talk to the miners," Jake said. "We're going to find out what's really happening, and then we're going to make a choice." The horizon's edge changed direction, moving away from Council space and toward the outer colonies. Jake knew that other human ships would be watching. The Council monitored all military vessels, and they would notice when a human captain disobeyed orders. 3 days later, they reached the mining colony on Sigma 7. Jake took a shuttle down to the surface with a small team. The miners met them with weapons raised, expecting another fight. But Jake raised his hands, showing he was unarmed. "We're not here to fight you," Jake called out. "We're here to listen." The miners' leader was a Venturi named Kess. His species was small and weak by human standards, but his eyes burned with determination. "The council sent you to force us back to work." "The council sent us," Jake agreed. "But we're not following those orders. Tell me what's happening here." Kess studied Jake for a long moment, then lowered his weapon. "Come, I'll show you." What Jake saw in the next few hours made his blood boil. The mining facilities were death traps. Safety equipment was broken or non-existent. Workers were given barely enough food to survive. Medical care was almost unavailable. Species were forced to work in environments that were slowly killing them, all to extract valuable minerals for council corporations. "We asked for help," Kess explained. "We filed official complaints through proper channels. The council ignored every single one. When we stopped working, they sent security forces to beat us into submission. We had no choice but to fight back." Jake returned to his ship and called a meeting with his senior officers. He also opened a secure channel to other human vessels in the area. Within an hour, he was connected to 15 other human captains. "I'm done," Jake said simply. "I'm done fighting the council's wars. I'm done watching good people die for a government that sees us as tools. I'm done being treated like a second-class citizen while doing first-class work." He paused, looking at each face on the screen. "The miners on Sigma 7 aren't rebels. They're people fighting for basic dignity. The council ordered us to crush them. I'm refusing that order." There was silence for a moment. Then Captain Ryan Blake, commander of the vessel Steadfast, spoke up. "What are you proposing, Jake?" Jake took a deep breath. "I'm proposing we stop, all of us. We stop fighting the council's wars. We stop following their orders. We withdraw every human from council service and go home." Another captain, Kate Sullivan, leaned forward. "That's desertion. The council will consider it an act of war." "Let them," Jake said. "What are they going to do? Fight their own battles for once?" He felt the weight of what he was suggesting, but he also felt certain. "For 50 years, we've been their attack dogs. We've bled for them, died for them, and they've given us nothing but disrespect in return. It's time we reminded them that we're not their slaves. We're human beings, and we deserve better." One by one, the other captains nodded. Jake opened a channel to Earth to Ambassador Lisa Grant, to the human government. He sent a message that would echo across the galaxy. It was only 2 words, but they carried the weight of 50 years of frustration, anger, and determination. No more. Part 2. The Quiet Withdrawal. The message spread through human military channels like electricity through a wire. No more. 2 simple words that carried a weight no one could ignore. Within hours, every human serving in council space had heard about Captain Jake Morrison's decision. Within days, they had to choose what it meant for them. Commander Ryan Blake sat in his ready room aboard the Steadfast, deep in Talaxian space. His ship and crew had been fighting on the front lines for 2 years, holding back an aggressive species that the council was too afraid to confront directly. Humans had been dying weekly, sometimes daily, while council species watched from safe distances and offered empty words of gratitude. Ryan pulled up the deployment records. The Talaxian front had 60 human vessels and over 20,000 human soldiers. The council had promised reinforcements from other species countless times, but those reinforcements never came. Humans were expected to hold the line alone because everyone knew they could survive conditions that would break other species. His second officer, Lieutenant Karen Brooks, entered the room. "Sir, the crew is asking questions." They've all heard about Morrison's message. Ryan leaned back in his chair. "What are they saying?" "Most of them want to know if we're going home." Karen hesitated. "Sir, I'll be honest. I want to know too. I've been out here for 18 months. I haven't seen my family in over a year. And for what? The council doesn't care if we live or die. They just care that we keep fighting their war." Ryan had been thinking about this since Jake's message arrived. He had spent his entire adult life in the service. He believed in duty and honor in following orders, but he also believed in being treated with basic respect, and the council had failed to provide that. He made his decision. "Send a message to all human vessels in the Talaxian sector," Ryan said. "We're going home." The council's response was immediate and predictable. Admiral Thex Azentari, who commanded the council forces in the region, appeared on Ryan's screen within an hour. His face showed a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Commander Blake, you are ordered to maintain your position. If you withdraw, you will be in violation of your service agreement and subject to military prosecution." Ryan looked at the alien admiral calmly. With respect, Admiral, we're done taking orders from the Council. You cannot simply leave. Dex's voice rose. The Talaxian forces will break through if you abandon your posts. Millions could die. Then I suggest you send your own ships to hold the line, Ryan replied. You have thousands of vessels doing nothing but patrol duty in safe sectors. Redeploy them here. Fight your own war. The Council species are not suited for this kind of combat, Dex said, as if explaining something to a child. That's why we need humans. No, Admiral. You don't need humans. You're just afraid to risk your own people. Ryan stood up. For 2 years my crew has held this line. We've lost hundreds of good people, and in all that time not one Council species has sent real support. You're happy to let humans die, but you won't risk yourselves. That's not a partnership. That's exploitation. If you do this, there will be consequences, Thex warned. Ryan felt a calm settle over him. Find someone else to die for you, Admiral. He closed the connection and gave the order. Every human ship in the Talaxian sector powered up their drives and began the journey home. The Council commanders screamed threats and promises and warnings, but not one human vessel stopped. On the Council homeworld of Centrum, Ambassador Lisa Grant prepared for the most important meeting of her life. She had requested an emergency session with the full Council, and they had granted it, assuming she would plead for understanding or negotiate some compromise. The Council chamber was enormous, designed to hold representatives from hundreds of species. Lisa stood alone in the center, surrounded by alien faces that ranged from curious to hostile. High Chancellor Vorin, a Drenthi with gray skin and multiple eyes, spoke first. Ambassador Grant, we have received disturbing reports. Human forces are abandoning their posts across the galaxy. This is unacceptable. We demand an explanation. Lisa had prepared a long speech, filled with statistics about human casualties, lists of broken promises, and evidence of systematic discrimination. But standing there, looking at the faces of beings who had never valued her species, she realized that none of that would matter. They would listen politely and then dismiss everything she said, so she kept it simple. The explanation is straightforward, Chancellor. Humanity is resigning. We are withdrawing from all Council agreements, all military operations, all diplomatic relations. Every human currently in Council space will return to Earth within 6 months. After that, we will close our borders. The chamber erupted in noise. Dozens of species tried to speak at once. Chancellor Vorin called for order, and it took several minutes before the room settled. You cannot resign, Vorin said firmly. Your species signed binding agreements. You have obligations. We fulfilled those obligations, Lisa replied. For 50 years, humans have fought your wars, died in your conflicts, and asked for nothing but basic respect in return. You have consistently failed to provide even that. The agreement is void. A Kalari representative stood up, his scales gleaming under the chamber lights. This is about the auxiliary force classification, isn't it? That was a minor administrative change. That was the final insult, Lisa corrected. But this isn't just about one decision. This is about 50 years of being treated as expendable. This is about watching my people die while you sit in comfortable chambers and congratulate yourselves on maintaining peace. This is about being told we're not good enough to be full Council members, while simultaneously being the only species you trust to fight your battles. If you do this, there will be economic sanctions, another representative threatened. Your species will be isolated. Lisa smiled, and it was not a friendly expression. Isolated from what? You've never treated us as equals. You've never traded with us fairly. Every agreement has been designed to benefit you at our expense. Isolation from the Council isn't a threat. It's freedom. Chancellor Vorin leaned forward. You're making a mistake, Ambassador. Humanity needs the Council. No, Chancellor, Lisa said quietly. You need us. You've forgotten how to fight your own battles. You've grown comfortable letting humans do the dangerous work. You're about to learn what the galaxy looks like without Deathworlders to protect you. She placed a data chip on the speaker's podium. This contains the formal withdrawal documents signed by Earth's government. You have 6 months to adjust. After that, consider all agreements terminated. Lisa turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind her, the Council erupted in chaos. Across the galaxy, the effects of human withdrawal became apparent immediately. Border regions that had been quiet for years suddenly erupted in violence. Pirate groups that had been held in check by human patrols grew bold. Trade routes that humans had protected became dangerous. The Council tried to fill the gap with their own forces, but they quickly discovered what they had forgotten. Warfare was brutal, dangerous, and required a willingness to risk everything. Species that had lived in peace for generations found themselves facing enemies they didn't know how to fight. On Sigma 7, the mining colony where this had all started, Jake Morrison watched the news reports with mixed feelings. Part of him felt vindicated. The Council was finally facing consequences for their actions, but another part of him worried about what would happen next. "Captain, we're receiving messages from other colonies," Ben Cooper reported. "They're asking for advice. Some of them want to follow our example." Jake nodded slowly. Humans weren't the only species that the Council had exploited. There were dozens of others, all watching to see what would happen. If humanity could stand up to the Council and survive, maybe they could too. "Respond to their messages," Jake said. "Tell them we'll share what we learned, but make it clear that each species has to make their own choice. We're not starting a rebellion. We're just refusing to be tools anymore." The quiet withdrawal continued. Human ships returned home from every corner of the galaxy. Soldiers came back to families they hadn't seen in years. Engineers, technicians, and specialists who had kept Council infrastructure running packed up and left. And the Council, for the first time in thousands of years, found itself vulnerable. The galaxy was changing, and everyone knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Part 3. The Siege That Failed. The Council was not accustomed to being defied. For over 3,000 years, they had been the supreme authority in the known galaxy. When the humans began their withdrawal, the Council's first reaction was shock. Their second was denial. Their third was rage. High Chancellor Voran called an emergency military session. Representatives from every major Council species gathered to discuss the human problem. The consensus was clear. Humanity needed to be taught a lesson. They needed to understand that defying the Council had consequences. "We will send a fleet to Earth," Voran announced. "We will show these Deathworlders that they cannot simply walk away from their obligations. They will submit or they will face the consequences." Admiral Thex, still burning with humiliation from the Talaxian withdrawal, volunteered to lead the operation. "Give me 3,000 ships," he said. "I'll bring Earth to its knees within a week." The Council approved the plan unanimously. They assembled the largest military fleet in galactic history. 3,000 warships from 24 species, carrying enough firepower to reduce a planet to ash. It was meant to be an overwhelming show of force, something that would make resistance impossible. The fleet took 6 weeks to assemble and another 3 weeks to reach Earth. When they arrived at the edge of the solar system, Admiral Thex sent a simple message to the human homeworld. "This is Admiral Thex of the Galactic Council Defense Force. You have violated your service agreements and abandoned your obligations. We are here to enforce Council authority. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally. If you refuse, we will take Earth by force." On the orbital station Haven Point, Admiral Kate Sullivan received the message and immediately convened her command staff. Kate was 53 years old and had spent 30 years in space. She had fought in 24 conflicts and earned more medals than she could count. She had also watched the Council treat humans like disposable tools for her entire career. "How many ships do we have?" Kate asked her tactical officer, Commander Dan Murphy. "In the solar system? About 400 combat-ready vessels," Dan replied. "We also have orbital defense platforms, ground-based weapons, and the satellite network." "But Admiral, they outnumber us 7-1. These aren't good odds." Kate looked at the display showing the Council fleet. It was an impressive sight. Thousands of ships arranged in perfect formation. She could see vessels from species she had fought beside for years. The Zentari dreadnoughts with their heavy plasma cannons, the Kalari carriers with their swarms of fighters, the Drenthi cruisers with their advanced shields. "Send a response to Admiral Thex," Kate said. "Tell him he has one chance to turn around and leave. If he attacks, we will defend ourselves with everything we have." Dan looked at her with concern. "Admiral, they're not going to back down. They're here to make an example of us." "I know," Kate said quietly. "Send the message anyway." Admiral Thex received Kate's warning and laughed. His bridge crew joined in. The idea that humans would threaten a fleet this size was absurd. They were brave, he would grant them that, but bravery without numbers was just suicide. "All ships advance," Thex ordered. "Target their defense platforms first. We'll show them what real military power looks like." The Council fleet moved forward in perfect formation, a wall of metal and energy that seemed unstoppable. Admiral Thex watched his tactical display with satisfaction. In a few hours this would be over and the humans would remember their place. Then the humans opened fire, and Thex's certainty began to crack. The first wave came from the defense platforms. Railguns firing solid metal slugs at a significant fraction of light speed. Each platform had been built by humans who understood that sometimes the simplest weapons were the most effective. The slugs tore through shields like paper and punched holes in ship hulls. The second wave came from human warships. They didn't fight like council vessels, staying at safe distances and exchanging fire in organized patterns. Instead, they charged directly at the enemy, firing everything they had. Their weapons were crude by council standards, but they were devastating. Nuclear missiles, kinetic impactors, chemical explosives, and even experimental weapons that Earth's military had been told were too dangerous to deploy. But it was the tactics that truly shocked the council forces. Human ships rammed enemy vessels, sacrificing themselves to take out larger targets. They used their own destroyed ships as cover, hiding behind wrecks and ambushing passing council vessels. They deployed mines that looked like debris, tricking council ships into flying through kill zones. And behind the military response, something even more surprising happened. Civilian ships joined the fight, mining vessels that had been converted into makeshift weapons platforms, transport ships filled with explosives, piloted by volunteers who flew them directly into enemy formations. Even private yachts and pleasure craft armed themselves and joined the defense. Admiral Thex watched his fleet take casualties and felt genuine fear for the first time in his career. "They're insane," he whispered. "They're all insane." His tactical officer, a young Zentari named Krill, looked pale. "Sir, we've lost over 300 ships. The humans aren't trying to win a battle. They're trying to make victory so costly that we can't afford it." On Earth's surface, the civilian population was mobilized like never before. Scientists who had been working on theoretical weapons suddenly found themselves asked to make those theories real. Factory workers who had never touched a weapon were assembling missiles and ammunition around the clock. Even children were helping, coordinating logistics and communications. President Helen Price watched from the emergency command center deep beneath the surface. She saw the casualty reports coming in and felt each loss like a physical blow, but she also saw something that made her proud. Humanity was fighting not just with weapons but with everything they had. Every person, every resource, every ounce of creativity and determination. "They're starting to break," her military advisor said, pointing to the display. "The council fleet is losing cohesion." It was true. The perfect formation that Admiral Thex had been so proud of was falling apart. Ships were breaking away, refusing to advance into the meat grinder that Earth's defenses had become. Some were even retreating without orders. Admiral Thex tried to rally his forces. "All ships maintain formation. We cannot let these primitives defeat us." But his words fell on deaf ears. The council species had not fought a real war in generations. Their crews were trained and disciplined, but they had never faced an enemy who fought with such reckless determination. They had never encountered people who would sacrifice everything to protect their home. Admiral Kate Sullivan saw the moment when the council's will broke. She had been in enough battles to recognize it. The enemy fleet wasn't retreating yet, but they weren't advancing either. They were hesitating, questioning whether victory was worth the price. She opened a channel to the entire council fleet. "This is Admiral Kate Sullivan of Earth Defense Command. You've been fighting for 72 hours. You've lost over 1,500 ships. You've killed thousands of humans, but we're still here, and we're still fighting. You can continue this attack and maybe you'll eventually win. But how many more of you will die first? How many ships will you lose? How many families will mourn?" She paused, letting her words sink in. "Or you can leave now, go home. Tell your council that Earth is not worth the cost. Tell them that humans will not be forced into submission. The choice is yours." Admiral Thex wanted to give the order to continue the attack. His pride demanded it, but he looked at his casualty reports and knew that Kate was right. Even if they won, the victory would break his fleet. The council would lose more ships in this one battle than they had lost in the last century combined. "All ships," Thex said slowly, each word feeling like defeat. "Begin withdrawal." The council fleet pulled back, leaving behind a debris field that would orbit Earth for years. They had come to teach humanity a lesson, but they were the ones who had learned something. As the enemy ships disappeared into the distance, Kate allowed herself a moment of exhaustion. They had won, but the cost had been terrible. Over 100 human ships destroyed, thousands dead, orbital infrastructure damaged. It would take years to recover, but they had done something that no one thought possible. They had stood against the most powerful military force in the galaxy and made them blink. President Helen Price addressed the planet that night. Her face was tired but determined. Today we prove that humanity will not be bullied. We will not surrender our freedom to anyone, no matter how powerful they claim to be. The Council came here to force us into submission, and we sent them away defeated. The galaxy now knows that Earth is not a target to be taken lightly. Across the galaxy, on hundreds of worlds, billions of beings watched recordings of the battle. They saw the Council fleet retreat in disgrace. They saw humans fighting with a ferocity that defied rational thought. And they began to wonder if the Deathworlders could stand up to the Council and win. What did that mean for everyone else? Part 4. The Galactic Reorganization. The defeat of the Council fleet sent shockwaves through the galaxy that no one could ignore. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Council had been the supreme authority, the final word on all matters of law and order. Their military might had never been seriously challenged. Now a single species from a backwater planet had humiliated them in a battle watched by billions across hundreds of worlds. The first cracks appeared within days. On the mining colonies where human withdrawal had begun, workers who had been quietly enduring terrible conditions suddenly became bold. They had watched humans stand up to the Council and survive. If the Deathworlders could do it, why couldn't they? A Venturi mining colony on the edge of Council space was the first to act. The workers simply stopped working. They didn't attack anyone or destroy anything. They just put down their tools and refused to continue until conditions improved. When the Council sent security forces to force them back to work, the miners fought back with a determination that surprised everyone. Within weeks, the resistance spread. Colonies on the rim worlds, stations in deep space, even some core world facilities saw workers organizing and demanding better treatment. It wasn't violent revolution. It was something more powerful, peaceful resistance that the Council didn't know how to handle. High Chancellor Vorin watched his authority crumble and felt genuine panic for the first time in his long career. The Council had maintained control for millennia through a combination of military power and the assumption that their authority was inevitable. Now both were being questioned. We need to negotiate with the humans, one of his advisors suggested. If we can bring them back into the Council, it might calm the other species. Vorin shook his head. They won't come back. We tried force and they defeated us. What leverage do we have now? The answer was, none. Lieutenant Ben Cooper stood on the observation deck of the Horizon's Edge, now permanently stationed at the edge of human space. His job had changed from military operations to something unexpected, advisor to alien species who wanted to learn from humanity's example. The requests had started coming in within days of the battle. At first, it was just a few messages from colonies asking for advice. Then it became dozens, then hundreds. Species who had never communicated with humans before were suddenly desperate to talk. "Sir, we have another delegation requesting a meeting," Ensign Amy Price reported. "This one is from the Calith system. They're asking how we organized our withdrawal without triggering a violent response." Ben smiled slightly. Set up the meeting. Add it to the schedule. He had conducted 40 such meetings in the last month. Every species wanted to know the same things. How did humans maintain unity during the withdrawal? How did they coordinate across such distances? How did they resist without violence until violence became necessary? The answer was always simpler than they expected. "We talked to each other," Ben would explain. "We made sure everyone understood what we were doing and why. We didn't leave anyone behind, and we didn't let the Council divide us. When they finally attacked, we defended ourselves together." It seemed obvious to Ben, but for many species it was revolutionary. The Council had maintained power by keeping species isolated from each other, by controlling information, by making sure no one could organize effectively. Humans had simply refused to accept those limitations. On Earth, President Helen Price faced a different kind of challenge. The Council was fracturing, and multiple species were asking to join a new alliance with humanity at its center. On the surface, it seemed like an incredible opportunity. Earth could become the center of galactic politics overnight. But Helen remembered why humanity had withdrawn in the first place. They had been tired of being used. If they became the leader of a new alliance, wouldn't they just be replacing one problem with another? She called a meeting with her cabinet and military advisors. Admiral Kate Sullivan, Ambassador Lisa Grant, and Captain Jake Morrison all attended via secure connection. "We're being offered power," Helen said bluntly. "A dozen species want us to lead them. They're promising resources, technology, support. All we have to do is say yes." Lisa spoke up from her connection on Haven Point. "It's tempting, I admit. But we didn't fight for power. We fought for respect and the right to make our own choices. If we start building an empire, we become what we opposed." Jake nodded in agreement. "The galaxy doesn't need new masters. It needs a new way of thinking. If we're going to help these species, it has to be as equals, not as rulers." Kate leaned back in her chair. "So what do we offer them? Friendship, advice? That won't protect them when the Council decides to retaliate." "We offer them an alliance of equals," Helen said slowly, the idea forming as she spoke. "Not a hierarchy where one species rules the others, but a genuine partnership where everyone has a voice. If the Council attacks any member, they attack all of us. The Council will see that as a threat," Lisa pointed out. "Let them," Helen replied. "We're not trying to overthrow the Council, but we're also not going to watch other species suffer the way we did. If they want peace, they need to change how they treat people. If they don't want to change, then they can deal with the consequences." The decision was made. Earth would not become the center of a new empire. Instead, they would help create something that had never existed in the galaxy. A coalition of species built on mutual respect and equal representation. The announcement was made through every communication channel in the galaxy. Earth was offering to help form the Frontier Coalition, an alliance open to any species that agreed to basic principles: no slavery, no exploitation, equal representation, and mutual defense. Humanity would be one member among many, with no special privileges except the respect they had earned. The response was immediate. Within days, 15 species formally applied to join. Within weeks, the number had grown to 40. They were mostly smaller species, ones that the Council had exploited or ignored. But there were also a few surprises: 2 core world species whose populations had grown tired of Council arrogance. The Council tried to interfere, of course. They sent diplomats to Earth offering concessions and compromises. They promised that if humans would just return to Council service, everything could go back to normal. Ambassador Lisa Grant met with them in a neutral station at the edge of Council space. She listened to their offers politely, then shook her head. "You still don't understand," Lisa said. "This isn't about getting a better deal within your system. This is about building a system that doesn't require anyone to be exploited. You can join us if you want, but only if you agree to the same rules as everyone else. No special treatment. No hierarchy. Just equality." The Council diplomats left insulted. The very idea that they should be equal to species they had ruled for millennia was offensive to them. But their opinions mattered less every day. The Frontier Coalition grew stronger, while the Council grew weaker. Border regions that had been loyal for centuries began questioning their allegiance. Trade routes shifted as species found new partners outside Council control. Captain Jake Morrison attended the first formal meeting of the Frontier Coalition as humanity's representative. The meeting was held on a neutral space station that had been abandoned by the Council and refurbished by Coalition members working together. He looked around the chamber at representatives from dozens of species. Some were familiar from his military service. Others he had never encountered before. They were different sizes, different colors, different cultures, but they all shared one thing. They were tired of being told they didn't matter. "This coalition isn't about replacing the Council," Jake said when it was his turn to speak. "It's about proving that there's a better way. We can work together without exploitation. We can defend ourselves without oppression. We can build something that benefits everyone, not just the powerful." A Venturi representative stood up. It was Kess, the mining colony leader who had first shown Jake the truth about Council exploitation. "The humans gave us hope," Kess said. "They showed us that standing up to the Council was possible. But more than that, they showed us that we deserve better. All of us deserve better." The chamber erupted in agreement. Admiral Thex watched recordings of the Coalition meetings from his office on Centrum. He had been demoted after the failed Earth siege, his reputation destroyed, but he still had access to intelligence reports, and what he saw worried him deeply. The Coalition was not just a political movement. It was a fundamental shift in galactic power. The Council had maintained control through fear. and the assumption that no alternative existed. Now there was an alternative, and it was growing stronger every day. He sent a private message to High Chancellor Voren. The humans were never the real threat. The threat is the idea they represent. That the Council is not inevitable, that power can be questioned, that there are other ways to organize civilization. You can't defeat an idea with warships. Voren never responded. The Council was too proud to admit that they had lost not just a battle, but the ideological war that mattered more. The galaxy was reorganizing itself, and for the first time in thousands of years, it was doing so without the Council's permission. Part 5. The new balance. 1 year had passed since humanity's withdrawal from Council service. The galaxy that emerged from that turbulent time was almost unrecognizable from what had existed before. The Galactic Council still existed, but it was a shadow of its former power. It now represented only the core worlds, the species too proud or too invested in the old system to accept change. They still had their grand chambers and elaborate ceremonies, but their authority was gone. When they issued proclamations, most of the galaxy simply ignored them. In its place, dozens of smaller alliances had formed. The Frontier Coalition, which humanity had helped establish, was the largest and most successful. But there were others: the Rimworld Federation, the Independent Systems Alliance, the Free Colonies Compact. Each had its own structure and rules, but they all shared one principle: no species should be exploited for the benefit of others. Commodore Jake Morrison, promoted from captain after his role in starting the withdrawal, sat in a conference room on New Haven Station. This was the Coalition's headquarters, built cooperatively by member species in neutral space. The station was a marvel of combined technology, with design elements from 40 different cultures. Around the table sat representatives from the Coalition's founding members. Kess, the Venturi who had first shown Jake the truth about Council exploitation, was now the Coalition's trade coordinator. A Calith engineer named Voss managed infrastructure projects. A Drenthi scientist named Mira led research initiatives. And Jake represented Earth in military matters, though his role had changed significantly. He wasn't a conqueror or enforcer. He was an advisor, helping member species develop their own defense capabilities. The Council is making threats again, Kess reported. They're saying that our trade agreements violate their economic regulations. Voss made a dismissive gesture. The Council doesn't control our trade anymore. They can complain all they want, but they have no authority here. Still, we should be careful, Mira cautioned. They may be weaker than before, but they're not powerless. If they feel desperate enough, they might try something foolish. Jake nodded. I agree. We're not at war with the Council, but we need to stay prepared. Kate is working on a joint defense network that would allow Coalition members to respond quickly if anyone is attacked. The meeting continued, covering topics from agricultural exchange to scientific cooperation. What struck Jake most was how normal it all felt. They were just people from different worlds working together to solve problems. There was no hierarchy, no species claiming superiority over others. When disagreements arose, they talked through them like adults. This was what the Council had never understood. They had assumed that galactic civilization required a rigid power structure, with someone at the top giving orders. But humans had proven there was another way. You could cooperate without domination. You could maintain order without oppression. On Earth, Admiral Kate Sullivan oversaw the Earth Defense Network from her office at Haven Point. The network had expanded far beyond Earth's solar system. Coalition members had contributed ships, technology, and personnel to create a defensive system that protected all member worlds. Kate reviewed deployment reports and felt satisfied with what she saw. The network wasn't designed for conquest or intimidation. It was purely defensive, meant to ensure that no member of the Coalition would face threats alone. If the Council attacked any Coalition world, they would face the combined might of dozens of species. But more importantly, the network's existence had made the galaxy more peaceful. Knowing that attacking a Coalition member would trigger a massive response had discouraged potential aggressors. Even pirates and raiders had learned to avoid Coalition space. Kate's comm panel beeped. It was Commander Ryan Blake, calling from the border station. He commanded. Admiral, we've detected Council ships near the Calith system, Ryan reported. They're not making any hostile moves, but they're definitely probing our defenses. Kate pulled up the tactical display. How many ships? 20, maybe 30. It's not an attack force, more like a reconnaissance fleet. Let them look, Kate decided. They need to see that we're ready. But make sure our people don't do anything that could be seen as aggressive. We're not looking for a fight, Ryan nodded. Understood. Blake out, Kate leaned back in her chair. The council was testing them, trying to find weaknesses. But they wouldn't find any. The coalition had learned from humanity's example. Preparation, unity, and the willingness to defend yourself were the best deterrents to aggression. On Centrum, the council homeworld, High Chancellor Vorin sat alone in his office and contemplated the ruins of his legacy. He was old now, much older than he had been when humans first appeared on the galactic stage. He had believed the council's authority was eternal, that their system was the only way to maintain order. He had been wrong. The reports on his desk told a story of steady decline. More species leaving council jurisdiction, trade routes shifting away from core worlds. Even some loyal members questioning whether the council still served their interests. And at the center of it all were the humans. Not because they sought power, but because they had shown everyone that alternatives existed. They had proven that you could stand up to the council and survive. That you could build something better. Vorin had tried to understand them. He had studied human history, their wars, their conflicts, their struggles. What he found was a species that had survived countless disasters through adaptation and determination. Earth had tried to kill them with ice ages, plagues, volcanic eruptions, and asteroid impacts. Each time, humans had survived and emerged stronger. The council had made a fatal mistake. They had seen humans as tools, as weapons to be used and discarded. They had never considered that a species tough enough to survive Earth would also be tough enough to resist oppression. A message appeared on Vorin's terminal. It was from Ambassador Lisa Grant, still on Haven Point after all this time. The message was simple, an invitation to send council representatives to a coalition meeting. Not as rulers but as equals, not to dominate but to participate. Vorin stared at the invitation for a long time. His pride wanted to refuse to maintain the fiction that the council was still supreme. But his practical side knew the truth. The council could either adapt or become irrelevant. He composed a response accepting the invitation. Back on New Haven Station, Jake Morrison received a report that made him smile. The mining colonies in the rim worlds, the same ones where this had all started, were thriving. Working conditions had improved dramatically. Workers had rights, safety standards, and fair pay. Production had actually increased because people worked better when they weren't being exploited. The colonies had become a model for other systems. Dozens of worlds were implementing similar reforms, proving that treating people with dignity wasn't just morally right, it was practically beneficial. Lieutenant Ben Cooper, now stationed permanently as a diplomatic liaison, entered Jake's office. Sir, we're getting more requests for membership. 3 new species want to join the coalition. Are they willing to accept our principles? Jake asked. Yes, sir. Equal representation. No exploitation, mutual defense. They've seen what we've built and they want to be part of it. Jake approved the applications. The coalition kept growing not through conquest or coercion, but through example. Other species saw what was possible and wanted the same thing for themselves. President Helen Price addressed the coalition members on the anniversary of humanity's withdrawal. The speech was broadcast across hundreds of worlds, translated into dozens of languages. 1 year ago, humanity made a decision that changed everything, Helen said. We decided that we would rather face uncertainty as free beings than continue living as tools. We didn't know if we would survive. We didn't know if anyone would join us. But we knew that some things were more important than comfort or safety. She paused, looking directly at the camera. What we've built together in this past year proves that we made the right choice. The Frontier Coalition isn't perfect. We still have disagreements and challenges, but we face them together as equals. No one is forced to sacrifice for others. No one is told they don't matter. Everyone has a voice, the speech continued. But its message was clear. The galaxy had learned that there were alternatives to exploitation, that cooperation didn't require domination, that peace didn't require submission. Admiral Kate Sullivan watched the speech from Haven Point and thought about how far they had come. A year ago, they had been preparing to defend Earth against impossible odds. Now they were helping build a civilization that worked for everyone. The Council still sent occasional threats, but they were hollow. Everyone knew the truth. The Deathworlders had finally snapped, and in doing so they had shown the galaxy what true strength looked like. It wasn't measured in warships or weapons, though those had their place. It wasn't found in conquering others or forcing them to submit. True strength was the courage to say no when everyone expected you to obey. It was the determination to build something better, even when the easy path was to accept what existed. The humans had been called Deathworlders because Earth was brutal and unforgiving. But they had learned something from their harsh world that